I remember that Tuesday as if the light itself had been intent on lying. It was one of those soft, deceptive evenings in late April when the air wants to be congratulated for not yet being summer, and the sky keeps secrets in a blue the colour of good intentions. Jay came in that night like a boy who still believed the world could be folded to fit his hands. He had the kind of smile that makes your chest ache in an old way. The same smile he used the first time he showed me a crayon drawing he'd made at school, the same one he used when he brought home a trembling, scrawny kitten and asked if we could keep it. Only this time there was a woman at his side who wore her certainty like armour. Her name was Claire. She moved through my house the way someone moves through a museum, cataloguing, framing, choosing angles. She wore a dress that seemed to cost more than some months of our grocery bills when I was widowed and pinched pennies. Her hair had the kind of salon sheen that makes ordinary mirrors resentful. She offered me a hand that was manicured in the way hands become when they are practiced to be beautiful and never to do heavy things. "This is Claire," Jay said, eyes bright as if he had found a missing piece of himself. "We're thinking about getting married." They sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd taught him to tie his shoes and staple sanity to homework nights. The pot roast was still warm in the oven. I'd cooked because that's what you do. The ritual of making food hasn't grown old in me. They took one look and talked about aesthetics. They called the house classic and authentic in the same breath and meant different things by those words. Claire mentioned that the living room had good light. Jay laughed like he'd been told a joke no one else could hear. "Mum," he said, the words soft like prayer, "we thought maybe we could stay here for a while, help each other, save money, start our life together." I watched the way her mouth learned to curve the way the room wanted it to. She leaned forward, bright and polite. "Yes, we think this place has so much potential. We could create content here, host events, small collaborations. It would be good for all of us. We'd be contributing." Her hands fluttered like reserve butterflies. Jay's voice was full of love and the greed of youth that thinks security can be bought with gestures. He looked at me with that hopeful look of a man who imagines sacrifice as proof of character, not as the currency of control. I said nothing for a long time. I could have refused then, politely or otherwise, because I knew the shape of that kind of generosity. It always cost more than it promised. But mothers have this defect of faith. They want their children's happiness. We let them try and fail and try again because the trying is part of the lesson. So I nodded and poured them more tea than I wanted to and told myself I would be cautious as a cat, but warm as always. They moved in 2 weeks later. "We'll be temporary," Jay promised, voice thick with that mixture of conviction and denial. They filled the master bedroom as if they'd always been its inheritors, and Claire taped a little note to the inside of a closet door that read, in bubbly script, "Content Staging Essentials." At first the intrusions were small, like ants that scout before an invasion. A new lamp in the parlour that burned a different kind of brightness. A ring light on the breakfast counter. A subscription on the account to a streaming service I didn't know the password to. Packages began to arrive in the morning, 2 or 3 a week. Glossy boxes, silk tissue, a smell of newness that never seems to settle. Claire filmed morning routine videos in my kitchen, placing the pot roast off camera like contraband. She called the old framed photograph of my husband an antique prop. One morning, I found the photograph face down in the closet, the wooden frame waiting, like a sleeping thing, behind a stack of softboxes. You learn to watch people when you're older. Watching becomes a profession of sorts. Your eyes trade flash for knowledge. I watched the way Claire arranged the cushions so camera light would fall on the right cheekbone. I watched Jay blink at her like a man casting his currency into a fountain and expecting wishes. I watched them invite strangers into our backyard, people with polite manners and flashy phones who stepped on the very jasmine I'd planted and laughed and called it vintage aesthetic. Some nights I felt like an exhibit too, displayed for a story that would be cut down the middle to fit an Instagram frame. Once I caught Claire's reflection in the window, and her expression was a choreography of calculation. She didn't exactly disdain the house. She appreciated what it could be. She spoke of visibility and brand partnerships in the same tone others speak of weather. "We can host a series here," she told Jay once while counting on her fingers the benefits of our porch and our kitchen island. Sponsorships, event rentals, collaborative shoots. The house could be a platform. Platform, I thought. Platform for whom? For the life she wanted. For the appearances she craved. Jay, who had once been the boy who chewed crusts and gave me his best stories, began to change, not suddenly but in the slow undoing of things. He took on extra shifts at work to build equity in whatever business plan she'd sketched on the back of a receipt. He joked about sponsorships like a talisman against poverty. He cleared my garage for equipment. He moved his father's old tool chest into a corner and covered it with a throw, as if the past needed to be disguised for the present's photography. When I mentioned, in passing, that his father used that chest to fix the leaky sink when Jay was a child, he smiled, then said, "We'll renovate it, Mum, make it nicer." One winter morning, a note appeared on the door to the guest room. "Studio setup in progress. Minimal foot traffic, please." The words were printed like a small legal warrant. I told myself to be patient. I told myself to trust my son. After all, I had trusted my husband at his worst and my son at his best. But patience and trust are not strong medicine. They are gentle salves that don't always heal the wound. I started keeping little records, not because I wanted a paper trail to shame them. I had no taste for public spectacle, but because there is a kind of truth in paper that words sometimes fail to hold. If my complaint ever needed weight beyond my voice, a ledger could show the scale. So I wrote down deliveries and dates. I made notes about who had come in and whether they'd sat at my kitchen table or behind a camera. I marked when the electricity bills doubled. I kept the receipts for things I did not buy. We went to a wedding shower a month later. Claire wore a dress that looked hand-stitched by someone who's never known a hardship. She posed with her phone like an altar. People commented on how lovely the house looked in her stories, and Jay would beam as if the praise were a family heirloom. That night, after they'd retired upstairs with the soft obsession of newlyweds in training, I sat in the dim living room and listened to the house breathe. The photos on the mantel stared back with the patient gravity of memory. I hadn't wanted confrontation, I still didn't. The louder the noise of accusation, the easier it is to bury the truth beneath a heap of defending words. Instead, I practiced a different kind of resistance, small and deliberate. I let the kettle cool without complaint. I answered texts hours later instead of immediately. I began to refuse little things that were, conveniently, billed as support. Money for a refill of a wardrobe, the precious credit card glimmering in a borrowed hand. I withheld not from spite, but from strategy. I wanted, more than anything, for Jay to see the outline of what he was offering when he gave these things away. There came a night when Claire was away on some promotional trip, a glossy weekend under the guise of collaborations. And Jay sat with me at the kitchen table looking like a man who'd just misplaced the firmament. He asked me why I didn't welcome how beautiful everything had become. He asked me why I didn't seem happy that he'd found someone who could help him rise. His voice held that boyish earnestness that has always bent men into being better or into being fools. Because beautiful things don't always carry truth, I said. Sometimes beauty is a costume, Jay. Sometimes it's not honest. He looked at me then as if I'd said something in a foreign language. "Mom," he said, voice low, "you don't know what this means. She believes in me." Belief, I realized, is another currency. He possessed it in abundance, and he was spending it like it grew on trees. I reached for his hand, the same way I reached for his scraped knees, his fears, the small embarrassments of adolescent disasters. "You are my son," I said, "not a billboard, not a producer's apprentice, not a means to someone else's beginning. Promise me you'll remember who you are when the lights dim." He smiled, squeezed my hand, and kissed the knuckle as if to seal a pact he was certain he'd keep. They married the following September, in our garden under strings of lights, guest standing on the lawn my husband once tended. Claire cried on cue and smiled like the whole scene was a glossy chapter worthy of a magazine. Jay's vows were full of big promises, the kind you give when the world feels new and your wallet doesn't yet know the landscape of debt. I watched them exchange rings, and in that ring I saw both a band and a promise. Not only to each other, but also to a story she was selling and a life he had not yet reckoned the price of. The first 6 months were an exhibition of curated joy, but joy that is curated often needs purchase. Sponsorships sagged when metrics slipped. Claire began to talk about upgrades that would secure the brand, more equipment, paid events. "We'll rent the basement out as a studio space," she told Jay, eyes bright with the way some people look at sums of money rather than at faces. "You'll be able to pay the loan back faster if we monetize every corner." When I heard the word monetize, something cold and exact arrived in my chest. I had always believed home was something you protected from balance sheets. Now balance sheets were moving in like tenants. I did not rage. I watched and I waited. I had learned, in other years, that revelation is a certain sort of revenge. It does not shout. It simply asks that someone look long enough at the shape of what they have made. When Jay's phone would buzz with notifications of a sale or an ad, I'd ask him a simple question: "Do you feel lighter for it?" He would glance across at Claire and then at me and answer, "Sometimes." Sometimes, I thought, is the admission of a life that's starting to betray itself. The full reckoning came on a night that seemed to have decided to be ordinary. Jay came home, shoulders heavier than they'd been, and placed an envelope on the table. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a note in Claire's handwriting. "Jay, I can't do this anymore. I need someone who can keep up." "I'm sorry." She was gone. She had taken what she wanted and left when the bills began to weigh more than the likes. She left Jay with the bills and a quiet hollow where faith had been. He sat on the floor and took in the blank space where the life he'd bought with hope had been staged. He pressed his face to his knees, and when I knelt beside him, he flung his arms around me and wept like a child who'd been told an ugly truth. It would be easy, from the outside, to call Claire callous, to call Jay foolish. It is easier still to imagine that this is the end of the story, a cautionary tale of modern vanity. But the house kept its furniture. The jasmine returned. The photograph of my husband, after I found it and cleaned the dust off, took its place above the mantel again. Some damage is visible, some is not. The work of repair begins in the invisible places, in the conversations, the reckonings, the slow unlearning of price tag love. I helped Jay sort paper on the kitchen table that night. We went through subscriptions he had signed, loans he had taken, things charged to a credit card he said was a temporary solution. He listened, not with the defiant certainty of before, but with the hollow attentiveness of a person who is counting what remains. Outside the window, the sky kept its indifference. Inside, the house, which had known so many voices, added a new one. Jay's, gentler now, a voice recalibrating from the ache of loss and the work of becoming. He looked up from the paperwork and asked, "How did I not see it?" "You don't see what you want," I thought. "You don't hear what you need to hear when hope is playing loud music." I did not say it. Instead, I handed him a pen and said, "Let's start with the ledger. Let's begin with the truth." For weeks after she left, Jay moved through the house like a ghost who hadn't realized he was dead. The silence around him wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that keeps its breath held, as if waiting for the living to decide what to do next. He left the note she wrote on the kitchen counter for 3 days. Didn't touch it, didn't throw it away, didn't fold it. He just stared at it the way a man stares at a wound. He doesn't yet believe is real. I didn't push him to talk. Grief that is pushed only hides deeper. I cooked for him, quietly. I checked on him like he was a boy again, but without the softness I used to use. Softness would have undone him. What he needed now was truth, served slow, the way cold medicine goes down, bitter but necessary. Some nights he stayed on the couch, some nights in their old bedroom. Once or twice I found him in the garage, sitting in front of his father's old toolbox, just running his hands over the edges as if trying to remember how something so simple, so heavy, so real used to anchor him. The house, this house that had survived my husband's death, a hailstorm that broke half the windows one year, 3 dogs, and countless slammed doors, was patient with him. The spaces he'd once run through barefoot now absorbed his pacing. The walls that once echoed with his teenage fights now handled his silence. The house didn't blame him. It simply waited for him to come home to himself. "He'll need time," I told the quiet kitchen when he wasn't listening. The kitchen, loyal as always, kept that secret. It was 2 weeks after she left that he finally began to speak in full sentences again. He came into the dining room while I was sorting laundry, something I did more loudly than necessary, hoping sound would nudge him back into the world. "Mom," he said quietly, "do you think she regrets it?" I looked at him, the same way I used to look at him when he was small, and asked if monsters were real. "People like Claire don't regret leaving, Jay," I said softly. "They regret losing the advantages they wanted." He looked down at his hands. "I wasn't enough for her." "You weren't wealthy enough," I corrected. "Those aren't the same thing." He closed his eyes and nodded, slow, as if the words had weight. Later that night he asked, "Did you always know? Was it obvious to you?" There it was, the question children avoid until they are broken enough to ask it honestly. "I knew from the beginning she loved the house more than she loved you," I said. "And people who love things more than people will always leave when the things run out." He absorbed that quietly, like salt left on the tongue. But here's the thing, Jay wasn't stupid. He wasn't weak. He was simply in love in the way some people fall into deep water, head first, eyes closed, believing the surface will hold them. He wanted to be her protector, her provider, her anchor. He wanted to be everything his father once was to me. But love is dangerous when it becomes ambition. One afternoon, maybe a month after she left, I heard him upstairs opening drawers. Soft thumps, a sigh. The unmistakable sound of someone discovering the last thing they didn't want to see. I found him sitting on the bedroom floor, surrounded by empty boxes. Receipts, old camera equipment manuals, an unopened envelope. "What's that?" I asked. He handed it to me without looking. Inside was a letter, not written by Claire, but by a brand agency, politely declining her because the environment lacks the aspirational tone required. "She never told me," he murmured, voice thin with shame. "She kept asking me for money, so she could keep trying, because she couldn't get these deals without a house like ours, without a life that looked stable, without him paying for everything she hoped to fake." But he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Instead, he surprised me. "I should have listened to you," he whispered. I sat beside him, keeping my voice steady. "No, Jay, you shouldn't have listened to me. You should have listened to yourself." He hesitated. "How do you mean?" "You knew," I said, "deep down. Every time you had to pay for something you couldn't afford, every time she called this house an asset instead of a home, every time you felt small while she felt elevated." He stayed quiet. Men often do when truth starts crawling up their spine. Truth is hard on pride. Finally, he said, "I'm embarrassed." "You should be," I said gently, "not for loving the wrong woman, that happens, but for handing her the keys to a home she never cared to earn." I reached out, brushed a piece of lint from his shoulder. "And now you learn." He lowered his head against the side of the bed, the same bed where he once slept under a blanket printed with astronauts. "I feel so stupid," he whispered. "You were in love," I said. "Love makes geniuses do stupid things and stupid people do impossible things. You'll be all right." But somewhere inside, I knew something else. He was breaking open. And sometimes breaking open is how you rebuild a better shape. Over the next few weeks, he started to return to small habits he'd abandoned when Claire entered his life. He sat with me during breakfast. He cleaned the porch the way he used to with his father. He took long walks around the block like he was relearning his own legs. He laughed occasionally, a short, startled sound, like he was surprised it still came out of him. Sometimes he asked small questions, always framed as if he were afraid of the answer. Was I really blind? Do you think I attracted someone like her because something's wrong with me? Would Dad have warned me sooner? I answered each one honestly, but never cruelly. You weren't blind, you were hopeful. Nothing is wrong with you. She chose the image she needed. And yes, your father would have warned you, but you wouldn't have listened to him either. He cracked a smile at that. A real one. One evening, he sat on the porch steps beside me, looking at the yard. The same yard he once covered in chalk drawings, the same one where Claire filmed lifestyle reels. After a long silence, he said, "I miss who I was before her." That sentence hung in the air like a lantern, soft, flickering, full of meaning. I didn't touch his hand, didn't coddle him. "You're finding him again," I said. He nodded. "I want to," he whispered, and I believed him. But I also knew, from experience, from age, from motherhood, that healing doesn't come from wanting. It comes from recognition, from responsibility, from finally seeing the shape of the mistake and choosing not to repeat it. Jay was halfway there, but the other half was still waiting for him. Heavy, necessary, and coming faster than he expected. And it wouldn't come from Claire. It would come from a truth he had avoided all his life. Not every woman who calls you her future wants to live in your home. Some just want to own it, and some only want to stay until the shine fades. Now that the shine was gone, Jay would have to face what remained. And what remained was himself. The morning he asked me to sit with him at the kitchen table was the first morning I recognized my son again. Not the hopeful, dizzy man he had been with her, but the quieter, steadier person he once was. The boy who used to bring me broken toys and ask if I could fix them. This time the thing broken was himself. He placed a stack of unopened envelopes between us. They were heavy, swollen with debt and warnings and interest charges. Bills in red ink, notices, statements with numbers that made my stomach clench. "I thought I could handle it," Jay whispered, eyes fixed on the table. "I thought it would all pay off, that someday we'd be successful enough to make all this worth it." His voice cracked on worth. People always think worth is something you can purchase. Only age teaches you that worth is something you protect, not something you pay for. I didn't rush to comfort him. Comfort at the wrong time becomes anesthesia. It numbs instead of heals. He needed clarity, not a warm illusion. "Start reading," I said. He opened the first envelope. His eyes widened. His breath stuttered. The world shrank around him. "How did this get so bad?" he whispered. "You kept trying to impress someone who wasn't impressed by you," I said calmly. "You tried to make her dreams real while she drained yours." He swallowed hard. "She said it was temporary. She said she needed help until she got stable." "She never meant stable," I replied. "She meant sponsored." He flinched as if the word hit him physically. One by one, he opened the rest of the envelopes. Late fees, loan balance updates, minimum payments 3 times his monthly income. "She left me with all of this," he murmured. "No," I corrected softly. "You gave it to her, willingly." He closed his eyes. "I feel so stupid." "You weren't stupid," I said. "You were lonely. And loneliness is a hunger that makes people swallow anything that looks like love." He scrubbed a hand over his face, ashamed. "I'm sorry," he said, "for bringing her here, for letting her treat you like furniture, for believing her over you." I shook my head. "You don't need to apologize for falling in love," I said. "But you do need to take responsibility for what you allowed love to turn you into." He nodded weakly. "Mum," he whispered, "do you hate her?" "No," I said. "I don't hate children who don't know the value of things, but I don't forgive them either." He gave a small, humorless laugh. "I guess that's fair." We sat in silence for a long time, the kind of silence that has weight and shape, the kind you don't break, only survive. Finally he spoke, voice low. What do I do? You rebuild, I said simply. You sell what she bought with your money. You cancel every subscription. You call every creditor and set up payment plans you can handle. You get a second job if you have to. I already have one, he said quietly. A night shift at the distribution center. I nodded. And now you get another part-time. It won't be forever, but it will remind you what real work feels like. He hesitated. And can I stay here? He asked. Not like before, not as someone using you, but as someone trying to start over. I looked at him carefully, not with softness, but with truth. This house is yours in the way childhood homes are always yours, I said, but you are not returning as a boy. If you stay, you contribute, you clean, you pay your part, you rebuild your dignity room by room. He nodded without hesitation. I will, I promise. Promises are fragile things, but this one felt heavy enough to trust. Jay spent the next week cleaning the bedroom Claire had abandoned. He boxed her cosmetics, her clothes, the little props she used for her videos. He stacked the boxes neatly in the garage. He didn't touch her wedding dress hanging in the closet. Not yet. I found him staring at it one night. She said it would be the dress she'd grow old in, he whispered. Some people grow out of love faster than others, I said. He nodded slowly, as if each movement hurt. That was the night I handed him a trash bag. He looked at it, then at the dress, then at me. Are you sure? He asked. No, I said honestly, but you are. He looked at the dress for a long time. Then he took it off the hanger, folded it, not lovingly, not angrily, but firmly, and placed it in the bag. When he tied the knot, something in him exhaled, something that had been holding him hostage. He threw it away himself, not because I asked him to, because he was finally choosing himself over her ghost. The next morning he woke earlier. He showered, he made coffee. He sat across from me with steadier eyes. Mom, he said, I want to learn everything you tried to teach me before. I smiled. I know, I said. We worked on the finances together. He listed every debt, every account, every charge she'd made. Sometimes his hands shook, sometimes he cursed under his breath. Sometimes he stared at the wall as if trying to remember the exact moment everything went wrong. But he kept going. He faced every number, every fee, every mistake. That is what growing up really is. Not success, not love, not status, but facing yourself. After the finances, we moved to the house. He fixed the broken hinge on the back door that he'd ignored for 2 years. He washed the windows until the sun shone through them, like forgiveness. He repaired the loose railing his father always meant to fix but never got to before he died. He didn't do these things to impress anyone. He did them because the house had taken care of him. Now it was his turn. One night, as we stood on the porch watching the streetlights flicker on, he said, I feel like I've been underwater for years, and now I'm breathing again. You are, I said. He leaned against the railing, quiet for a long moment. Mum, he finally said, do you think I'll love again? Yes, I said without hesitation, but not blindly, and not someone who sees your home as a prize. You'll love someone who sees you. He swallowed thickly. I didn't realize how invisible I was with her. You weren't invisible, I said. You were useful. He winced. But now, I added, you get to become someone who is loved for who he is, not what he provides. He breathed in slowly. I hope so. I know so. He looked at me then with something I hadn't seen in years. Gratitude, humility, a hint of strength. But more than anything, recognition. He was beginning to recognize himself again. And that was only the beginning of what he still had to face, because Claire had left. But the consequences she planted were still alive, still growing. And one of them was coming straight toward us. For a little while, life steadied. Jay worked nights and early mornings. He repaired small things around the house. He stopped flinching when his phone buzzed. But healing never travels in a straight line. It curves, it doubles back, it brings ghosts. and one of Claire's ghosts arrived in the form of a voicemail. Jay played it on speaker because his hands were shaking too badly to hold the phone. A woman's voice, sharp, irritated. "Jay, this is Marlene from Premier Accounts. We're still missing payment for the lighting equipment your wife financed. Total due is..." Jay paused the message, his face going pale. "I didn't sign anything," he whispered. "I never bought lights. She said they were gifted." "Of course she did," he pressed play again. "And since Claire listed you as co-responsible, we'll need you to call us back today." He sank into the kitchen chair like the floor had slipped from under him. "I don't have this money," he said. I can't pay for things I didn't even know existed." He was unraveling again. Not like before. This time he was angry. Angry at her, angry at himself, angry at the future she'd bought in his name. I sat down across from him. "You're going to call them," I said. "You're going to request every document with your signature. If your signature isn't on it, you're not paying." He swallowed hard. "But what if she forged it?" "If she forged it, we'll deal with that too." He looked at me, desperate. "How are you so calm?" "Because panic never paid a bill," I said. "And we're not victims, Jay. We're simply cleaning up the mess someone else made." He nodded slowly, breathing steadier. But just as he reached for the phone, something unexpected happened. The front door opened. We both turned. A tall man stood in the doorway. Expensive jacket. Watch that cost more than Jay's car. He looked around the house with quiet recognition. "Is Claire here?" he asked. Jay froze. "No," he said faintly. "She moved out." The man nodded as if he'd expected that answer all along. Then he saw me. "Mom," he said politely. "I'm Evan. I suppose you should know. Claire's been staying with me for 3 months." Jay blinked slowly, like the world had tilted. 3 months?" he repeated. "She left 2 months ago." A pause, a realization, a wound opening wider. The man looked genuinely sorry. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I need to collect a few things she had delivered here. She told me you wouldn't mind." Delivered here? More packages? More debts? More lies layered over lies? Jay braced himself on the counter. "She used me," he said quietly. "She used both of us." The man nodded. "She uses everyone," he said simply. "I'm done with her too." He held up a set of keys. "These belong to her. I think she meant to keep the spare to your house. You might want to change the locks." I took them from his hand. Jay looked like he might break again, but he didn't. He just closed his eyes and whispered, "I don't want her shadow in this house anymore." And in that moment, I saw something shift in him. Not pain, not shock. Resolve. He opened his eyes. "Mom," he said, voice low and steady, "let's finish this, all of it." And that was the first time since Claire entered our lives that I believed him. The moment Evan left, Jay stood in the hallway holding the keys Claire never intended to return. His face went blank, not broken, not angry, just emptied. "Change the locks," he said quietly. "It wasn't a question. We called a locksmith that afternoon. A small, wiry man with rough hands who'd clearly seen enough human drama to never ask questions." Jay watched every screw removed, every mechanism replaced, like he needed the sound of metal turning to cleanse something inside him. When the locksmith left, Jay tested the new key in the new lock. Once, twice, a third time. "It's ours again," he murmured. He didn't mean the door, he meant the house. He meant his life. But the past has a way of clawing through even locked doors. The next morning, another envelope arrived, a thick one, official-looking. Jay opened it slowly. It was a final notice for a content creator tax filing service subscription in Claire's name, with his bank information attached. I watched his shoulders tighten. "She didn't leave just mess," he said. "She left traps." He sank into a chair, the envelope limp in his hand. "I feel like every day I'm finding a new way she lied to me." "You are," I said simply, And that's good. He looked up, confused. Good. You can't heal from something you still romanticize. He exhaled shakily. Mum, I don't even know who I was with her. You were a man who wanted love, I said. That's not shameful, but now you get to become a man who knows better. He rubbed his eyes and whispered, almost afraid of the answer. What if I fall for someone like her again? You won't, I said, because this time you'll listen to the silence, the small hesitations, the things that felt wrong even when you pretended they were right. He nodded slowly. Then, for the first time since she left, he said something I'd been waiting for. I don't want her back. I want myself back. He stood, tossed the subscription papers into the trash and said, let's keep going. Whatever else she left, I'm ready. And I believed him, because a man who wants himself back is already halfway home. The next weeks were quieter, but it was the kind of quiet that follows a storm. Debris everywhere, but the air finally breathable. Jay sorted through every drawer in the master bedroom. Receipts, unused serums, fake gold jewelry she'd insisted was investment pieces, empty makeup bottles saved only for pictures. He filled bags without sentiment. She left so much behind, he said once. No, I corrected. She left nothing she valued. He paused at that, then kept packing. One afternoon, while going through a box she'd hidden under the bed, Jay found a folder thick with printouts. Contracts, email threads, screenshots of conversations with brand managers. But one page made him freeze. It was a list titled Leverage Points, Home Content Strategy under it, in Claire's handwriting. Use his mother's house as set until upgraded location available. Encourage Jay to take out renovation loan. Propose partial ownership transfer for tax purposes. Push for long-term commitment before financial decline visible if conditions fail. Exit quickly, Jay's face drained of color. She planned it, he whispered, all of it. He sank onto the bed and stared at the page as if it might start burning. I thought she wanted a future, our future. She wanted a stage, I said. You just happened to be standing on it. He pressed a hand over his mouth. I feel sick. That's good, I said gently. It means you're finally seeing the truth without trying to soften it. He nodded, small and shaky. Then he folded the page, once, twice, and dropped it into the trash bag. None of this comes back into my life, he said. He meant it. Later that evening, he stood in the hallway and looked around the house. The same house she tried to claim without earning a single inch of it. This place, he began, voice quiet. It always felt like home, but with her here it felt like a set, like I was an extra in my own life. And now, I asked. He took a long breath. It feels like mine again, not because she's gone, but because I finally see what she never saw. He smiled, just faintly. A real home. And I realized then, she took his money, she took his confidence, she took months of his life, but she couldn't take the part of him that mattered. She couldn't take the man he was becoming. A few days later, Jay came home from work smelling like dust and cold air, the scent of real effort, not the polished illusion Claire had demanded from him. He dropped his keys into the bowl by the door and said, I thought about her today. I didn't answer. He wasn't telling me for comfort. He was telling me because he finally wanted clarity. She always said she loved the life we were building, he continued, but now I realize she never loved life with me, just life around me. He sat at the table, rubbing a thumb over the wood grain like he was grounding himself. You know what she never understood? He asked. I waited. He gestured around the kitchen. The old cabinets, the slightly crooked drawer, the clock that ticks too loudly. This, he said, real things, ordinary things, quiet things. He shook his head. She thought love was luxury, but all the things that saved me after she left were simple. He held up his hands, rougher now, steadier. Work, sleep, dinner, talking to you, fixing the door, breathing without pretending. He leaned back, exhaling. She never understood that a life is built from moments that don't make content. I smiled because he was finally saying what I had waited months to hear. She couldn't see what mattered, I said. He nodded, and I couldn't see what didn't. The wind outside rattled the porch rail, but the house didn't feel shaken anymore. Jay looked up at me, eyes clear. "I'm done looking backward," he said. "I'm done letting her shape anything in me." He stood, stretched his shoulders and added, "I just want my life, my real life." For the first time, he didn't sound broken. He sounded free. Jay's healing didn't arrive in a grand moment. It arrived in small ones. Like the morning he made his own coffee again, without asking if I wanted some, without hovering to see if he was doing it right. Just living. Or when he fixed the loose porch board and didn't announce it, didn't look for praise. He simply worked, stood, wiped his hands, and moved on. One evening, he came into the living room, sat down across from me and said, "I'm not embarrassed anymore." I set my book aside. "For what?" I asked. "For surviving her," he said, "and for not letting what she did break me permanently." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. For a while, I felt like I had to apologize, to you, to myself, to anyone who knew how badly I messed up. But now, he exhaled, long and short, "I'm just glad I woke up. Some people never do." He wasn't angry, wasn't bitter. He was simply awake. And that, more than anything, was the change I'd hoped for. He smiled, a real smile, small but honest. "I thought she took everything from me," he said. "But the truth is, I gave her everything she got, and now I'm taking myself back." He stood, stretched, and said something that made my chest warm. "Mom, we're going to be okay." Not I. We, it meant more than he knew. As he walked off to bed, shoulders no longer slumped, I realized something quietly remarkable. He wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. Not to me, not to the world, not even to himself. He had finally stopped living like a man who'd been discarded and started living like a man who had endured and learned. One rainy afternoon, Jay came down from the attic with a single box in his hands. It was dented, dusty, taped sloppily, the way people pack things they don't plan to keep, only hide. "I think this is the last of her stuff," he said. He set it on the kitchen table and stepped back like he didn't want to touch it again. "Open it," I said gently. He hesitated, then pulled the tape loose. Inside were scraps of her life, and scraps of the lies she'd wrapped around his. A half-broken ring light, a notebook full of content goals, a pair of heels she'd worn once for photos, a checkbook with his name written on the back of her cards, and at the bottom, a single envelope. Jay froze when he saw it. "What is that?" I asked. "I don't know," he said quietly, "but it's in her handwriting." He opened it slowly. Inside was a letter addressed to herself, not to him, a list, a plan, 5 lines that sliced the air like cold steel. "Use his house until I can upgrade secure brand deals. ASAP push him to co-sign on loan leave. If finances decline, never depend on him." Emotionally, Jay stared at the paper, face empty of expression. Too empty. "She wrote this while we were together," he whispered. I nodded. "Probably before you were even married." He didn't speak for a long moment. Then he folded the letter in half, then in quarters. "This is the last part of her," he said quietly, "and I don't need it." He walked to the sink, turned on the flame of the stove, held the edge of the paper over it. The flame caught quickly, gold, then orange, then black. We watched it curl and disappear, not with satisfaction, not with revenge, with closure. When it was gone, he wiped his hands on his jeans and whispered, "I thought she broke me, but she didn't. She just stretched the part of me I hadn't grown yet." He closed the empty box and carried it to the door. "Where are you taking it?" I asked. "To the curb," he said. "I don't want even the cardboard." He placed it outside. When he came back in, he locked the door behind him, calmly, without ceremony. Then he turned to me. "I think I'm ready," he said. "For what?" "For my life, the one I should have been living all along." It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't triumphant, it was real. And real was all he needed to become whole again. Jay changed after that day, not suddenly, but in a way the house could feel. He walked differently, not heavy, not dragging, not hesitant, just present. He moved through the rooms like someone returning to a language he once spoke fluently. He fixed the loose cabinet hinge that had squeaked for months. He organized the basement and found tools his father left behind. He even repainted the porch rail where the wood had faded. Not for Claire, not to impress anyone, for himself. One morning, while he sanded an old dresser on the back patio, he said, "I forgot I like doing things with my hands." His voice had a kind of surprised softness. "You didn't forget," I said. "You just stopped having space for yourself." He nodded, brushing sawdust from his shirt. That's exactly it. With her, everything was noise. Everything had to be shown. Nothing could just be. He paused, thinking. I think I miss silence more than I ever missed her. Later that week, he brought home a small potted plant, something simple with round green leaves. "For the kitchen," he said. "I figured it's time to start adding things instead of subtracting." He set it near the window, adjusted it twice, stepped back, nodded. A small thing, but healing hides in small things. That evening, he cooked dinner. Not fancy, not performative, just pasta with garlic and herbs. Halfway through the meal, he said, "Mum, do you know what I realized?" "What?" "That I spent all that time trying to be the man she wanted, when the best parts of me were the ones she ignored." I smiled. "You found them again." He looked down at his plate. "Yeah," he whispered. "I did." He cleaned the dishes afterward without being asked, humming under his breath, a tune I hadn't heard since he was a teenager trying to memorize guitar chords. The house seemed to breathe easier with him now. No ring lights, no staged poses, no strangers drifting in and out. Just us, just life, just peace. One night, after locking the door, he paused and touched the handle. "You know," he said, "for months I thought she stole everything from me." "And now?" I asked. He shrugged lightly. "She only took what I was foolish enough to hand over." His voice wasn't bitter, just honest. "And everything else?" I pressed gently. He looked around, at the hallway, the photos, the worn rug, the lamp his father used to read under. "Everything else," he said, "was waiting for me to come back." He wasn't talking about the house anymore. He was talking about himself. And that was the quiet triumph he'd been working toward, step by step, repair by repair, truth by truth. He didn't need revenge. He didn't need closure from her. He didn't need an apology. He had rebuilt himself without her shadow. And the man standing in front of me now, calm, steady, sure, was stronger than the one she'd entered our home to use. He was home, truly home. Jay's progress didn't come with fanfare. It came with ordinary mornings, the kind where he brewed coffee without thinking about how it looked, the kind where he stretched on the porch, barefoot, not caring about appearances, the kind where he talked to me about work without shame, tightening his voice. One evening, he sat across from me at the kitchen table, tapping a pencil against a notepad. "I've been thinking," he said quietly. "I want to start over financially, completely, no shortcuts, no pretending." I looked at him closely. "Tell me." He pushed the notepad toward me, a simple budget plan, handwritten, realistic, humble. Not the grand fantasies Claire used to push, not the imaginary brand-building math she had invented for him, just truth. "I don't make much," he said, "but I make enough to live honestly. It's not glamorous, but it's real." "Real is enough," I said. He exhaled, not out of defeat, but relief. "I want my life to be boring in all the right ways," he added with a half smile. "Bills paid, work stable, dinner at home, no performances, no pressure." He paused. "And if I ever fall in love again, I want it to be because someone sees me, not what I can provide." He looked down, embarrassed. "Is that pathetic?" "No," I said. That's maturity. The next few days, he rearranged his room, packed up the last reminders of her, the expensive shampoos she abandoned, the silly velvet hangers, the gift bags she saved for content. He tossed them in a box and didn't look back. Then he did something I didn't expect. He brought out his old sketchbook. He hadn't drawn in years, not since before Claire. He sat at the dining table one quiet afternoon and flipped it open. All the early sketches were still there, landscapes, old cars, faces he'd seen on trains. His expression softened. "I forgot I loved this," he murmured. He sharpened a pencil, bent over the page, and began to sketch the backyard, our backyard, the place he'd neglected, the place she never cared to sit in unless the lighting was perfect. And slowly, line by line, he drew something that wasn't sadness, wasn't regret, wasn't longing. It was clarity. When he finished, he held out the sketch to me. "What do you think?" I studied it. The shadows, the careful strokes, the way he'd captured the fence his father built. "It looks like home," I said. Jay smiled, tired, grateful, honest. "That's what I wanted." He stared at the sketch a little longer before closing the book. "You know," he said softly, "she never asked to see any of this, not once. She never asked what I liked, what I wanted, who I was. And now you know why," I said. He nodded. "She wasn't looking for a partner," he murmured. "She was looking for a platform. And you," I said gently, "were looking for hope." He let out a breath he'd been holding for months. "But now," he whispered, "now you're looking for something real." He nodded again, slower this time, and I realized then, not with pride, not with relief, but with quiet gratitude, that my son was no longer the man she broke. He was the man he was always meant to become, not perfect, not wealthy, not impressive to the world, just real and whole, and that was more than enough. It happened on a Thursday, a plain day, a quiet day, a day that didn't deserve what knocked on our door. Jay had just come home from work, still in his worn jacket, dust on his sleeves, a tired but peaceful look in his eyes. He went upstairs to shower, humming under his breath, something he only did now that he finally felt human again. Then the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a towel, walked to the entryway, and opened the door. And there she was, Claire, perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect coat that probably cost more than 3 of Jay's paychecks. But her eyes weren't perfect, they were frantic. "Hi," she said, trying to smile. It trembled. I didn't speak. I didn't move aside. I know this is awkward," she said softly. Her voice had that false sweetness she used when she wanted something. It didn't work on me then, and it didn't work now. "Is Jay home?" she asked. "He doesn't need to see you," I said calmly. She blinked quickly, offended, confused, desperate all at once. "I'm not here to fight," she said. I made mistakes. I see that now. I just want to talk to him." "No." One word, solid as the house behind me. She laughed nervously. "You can't keep me from him." "I don't have to," I said. "He doesn't want you." That landed. I watched it hit her, right in the pride, the one thing she'd always valued more than my son. She crossed her arms. "I think he deserves to decide that for himself." "He already did." Her jaw tightened. "What do you mean?" "Claire," I said carefully, "he burned the last piece of you he found in this house." Colour drained from her face. Not from sentiment, from ego. She glanced past me, as if expecting Jay to appear and rescue her from reality. "He still loves me," she whispered. "I know he does." That was the moment Jay came down the stairs, hair damp, face clean, eyes clear. He froze when he saw her. She gasped softly like he was a gift she'd forgotten to unwrap. "Jay," she breathed. "I've missed you." He didn't move toward her, didn't soften, didn't even blink. "Why are you here?" he asked. Her smile wobbled. I've been thinking a lot, and I realized I wasn't fair. I wasn't my best self. I want to make things right. We were good together, Jay." "We weren't," he said. She flinched. He stepped forward but didn't go near her. "I'm not angry," he said. "Not anymore, but I'm not going back." "But we were building a life," she said quickly, voice rising, panic bleeding through. "No," Jay said softly. "You were building a brand. I was financing it." Her mouth opened, closed. He didn't raise his voice, didn't humiliate her, didn't list the debts, the lies, the damage. He simply said, "I deserve better." Her eyes filled, not with sorrow, but with disbelief. As if she couldn't imagine a world where someone she once controlled no longer bowed to her. "You'll regret this," she whispered. Jay shook his head. "I already did, but not anymore." He turned to walk back inside, and she made one last attempt. "Jay!" she cried. "Please, I don't have anyone else." He paused. Then, without turning around, he said, "And I don't have myself from before. I'm not going to lose the man I am now to save the woman you were then." Silence. Real, final silence. He stepped inside. I closed the door behind him. We didn't talk for a while. We just stood in the hallway, breathing in the quiet she'd tried to poison. Finally, he said, "It feels different, easier than I thought." I nodded. "That's what happens," I said, "when you finally choose yourself." He exhaled, long, relieved. "I'm done," he said, and he was, completely. After Claire's visit, the house felt different. Not because she had come back, but because Jay hadn't let her in. You could almost feel the walls exhale, as if the house itself had been holding its breath, waiting to see if the past would be allowed to seep in again. It didn't. That night, Jay sat at the kitchen table long after dinner, turning a mug between his hands. He wasn't shaken, he wasn't hurt, he wasn't even angry, he just looked lighter. "I thought seeing her would break me," he said quietly. "It didn't." "No," I said, "because you're not the same man she left." He nodded slowly, taking that in. A truth he'd earned. "I didn't even want to hear her out," he added. "That surprises me." "That's what growth feels like," I said. "It's quiet, it's steady. It doesn't argue with the past, it just keeps walking." He smiled at that, a small, honest smile, the kind that didn't exist when she lived here. A week passed, then two, and life settled like dust on a sunny shelf, gently, without noise. Jay cooked more often. He fixed a leak under the sink. He started going to the gym again, started reading in the evenings, started humming when he brewed coffee. Little things, ordinary things, things that returned him to himself. One evening, while I sat knitting by the window, he came in holding a small envelope. "What's that?" I asked. He sat across from me and opened it carefully. "It's the last loan payment," he said. "The big one." The one Claire pushed him into signing, the one that nearly drowned him. He placed the receipt on the table. "Paid," he whispered. His voice cracked, not from pain, but from relief. "I did it," he said. "Every single debt, every bill, every stupid thing she left me with. I cleared it." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I'm proud of you," I said. And I meant it, not because he paid off the money, but because he paid back his life. Later that night, he stood in the doorway of the living room, watching me read. "You know what feels strange?" he asked. "What?" "I'm not afraid anymore, not of running into her, not of falling again, not of being alone. I'm just calm." "That's peace," I said. He leaned against the doorframe, thoughtful. I didn't know peace could feel like this. "How does it feel?" He thought for a moment. "Like nothing is missing." I closed my book. "That's when you know you're healed," I said. He nodded, breathing slowly, deeply, with a certainty I hadn't seen in him since he was a teenager. We said goodnight. He went upstairs. I heard his door close softly. The house was silent, but not the cold, uncomfortable silence she brought with her. This was a warm silence, a lived-in silence, a silence that offered rest instead of judgment, a silence that meant one thing: we had survived her, but more importantly, Jay had survived himself. And the future no longer felt fragile, it felt open. Spring came early that year, the kind of early that makes the grass wake up before people do, the kind that paints the air soft and warm and forgiving. Jay spent most evenings on the porch now, sanding old wood, fixing loose boards, repainting frames. Not because the house needed it, but because he did. Working with his hands steadied him in a way nothing ever had. One afternoon, he called out, "Mum, come look." I stepped outside. He'd built a new flower box, simple, sturdy, beautiful. "For the front window," he said. I figured the house deserves something new. I smiled. So do you. He planted marigolds, bright, brave little flowers that thrive almost anywhere. "Why these?" I asked. Jay shrugged. "They come back every year, no matter what winter does to them." He didn't have to explain. I understood. He was choosing resilience. Quiet, steady resilience. Not the performative kind Claire used to film, but the kind that grows roots in real soil. That night we ate dinner on the porch. He talked about work, about maybe taking a class, about maybe saving for his own place someday. Something small, something he could build with his own 2 hands. Not to impress anyone, just to live. When dinner was done and the plates were stacked, he said something I knew was coming. "Mum, I'm not scared to start again." "I know," I said, "and I'm not angry at her anymore." "I know that too." He looked out across the yard. "I actually hope she finds what she wants, not with me, just somewhere far away." It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't forgiveness. It was release. The final piece. Claire tried to reach out one more time, a text sent late at night, the kind a person sends when pride finally loses its last battle. "Can we talk? I'm sorry." Jay read it. He didn't reply. He didn't even hesitate. He simply deleted the message, put his phone down and said, "I don't feel anything." And that was the end of her power. Not the day she left, not the day she returned, but the day she meant nothing. Part thesis. The house with room for tomorrow months passed. Jay paid off the last of the small debts. He saved a little each paycheck. He cooked without asking for guidance. He lived without worrying about being enough. One evening, as we folded laundry together, he said, "You know what I think the real lesson was?" "What?" He smiled, calm, sure, whole. "That love isn't supposed to cost you your home, your money, or yourself." I nodded. "And if it does," he added, "it's not love." He placed the last folded towel in the cabinet and leaned against the counter. "I used to think someone like her validated me. Now I know I was enough without her." I touched his cheek. "You always were." Our life became simple again. Jay went on peaceful walks every evening. He tended the garden. He played old music on the porch. He laughed easily. He slept deeply. One Sunday morning, while we sat with coffee, he said, "I think I'm ready to move out next year. Not far, just into a place that's mine." My heart swelled, not from sadness, but pride. "That's how it's supposed to be," I said. He nodded. "But I want you to know something," he added. "I came back to myself in this house because you didn't save me. You waited for me to save myself." I squeezed his hand. "That's the only way it lasts," I said. He smiled, a real, full smile. "I'll never let anyone like her back into my life," he said softly. "You won't have to," I replied. "You've already outgrown that version of yourself." He took a deep breath, looked around the kitchen, the same one she once called content-friendly, and said, "This is home, and the next one will be too, because I'll be the one building it." And that was the end of her shadow. Not with drama, not with revenge, but with a simple truth. She took his past, but he took his future back. And that is a victory no one can steal.